Howdy, Brian.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Doing good. The wind finally stopped and the sun is out, and
Excellent.
so I'm happy with all that. Yeah.
Yeah, Isaac called me from up at the land a couple of days ago, and he was bummed that it was all cold and blustery. And like, what is this? It's like late May. Let's get spring going here.
Oh, it
So
was
I'm
seriously windy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm happy to hear it's uh, finally getting nice. So, so we were just talking about your recent interest in crypto and markets, and seems like a bridge, a bridge too far for us. Certainly, I don't consider either of us to be um, economists or market experts, but I know you've been studying it some, and in our brief conversations about it, you've related it to kind of macro trends, I would say, in consciousness or in philosophy. So I thought it would be interesting for our listeners to hear your take and what interests you about crypto and how are you thinking about it.
Yeah. I think there's actually a lot going on with crypto. And, there's the McLuhan angle.
Say more.
There's well, the march of technology as an extension of man, and all the implications of that, particularly to do with the interwebs, which I mean, we're even speaking as a result of it. But McLuhan had this idea, of media being hot or cold. So a book is a very cold type of media, type of medium. uh, the radio is hotter than a book. Uh,
Can you say what
TV.
you mean by hotter?
Well, I think it has to do with just downloading more information to you. And he also had this idea uh, that media, they represent a piece of things, and we fill in a lot. And so, for example, if you're watching a television show, a traditional television show, when a camera angle changes, you fill in that it's in the same room, but now you're seeing from this side of the room, and before you were seeing from the door, and now so you're having to complete the the data flow that you're getting to get comprehensible unity out of it, to make it coherent, right? To make it stick together. Again, that coherence idea that we strive for. So so McLuhan called that striving for closure. And the idea was that different generations, uh, different generations are sensitized to different media, so for example, if my grandmother, who was born in the year 1900, right, 124 years ago, when she would watch TV, they had the old black and whites that were almost like a stage, and the camera shots were all very long, and she could watch that fine, no problem. Or the Lawrence Welk show, where it's like you're a member of an audience and a stage is performing something. That was coherent enough because it was just one lane over from her normal experience. But later on in my youth, we had MTV. Now with MTV, in the time of a radio song, 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes, maybe if it's long, a whole story gets told. And you have to supply a lot more than you did back in the old black and whites, right? There's the girl, she's in the car and it's raining, and there's the guy, and and you have to piece together all of these things. And then in 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes, it's over. So you had to really work for closure. And one of the things about that MTV represents, for McLuhan, he said that whenever you take two existing media and you hybridize them, the resulting creation will be a hotter form of medium or a hotter form of media than the original media that you were making it out of. So
It
MTV's
reminds me of traditional, modern, postmodern, integrative worldviews, each needing to transcend and include the former, but containing material that doesn't exist in the formers.
Right. And each of these also sort of represents another wave of our extension, because that's what McLuhan called these things, extensions of mankind. So, so if you take that principle and then you look at the internet, there was no internet per se when McLuhan was writing. But if you look at his idea of hybridization of media, we look at okay, obviously we had television, now we have the internet. It just pretty much slid in there, and we're watching the legacy manifestation of television just kind of slowly ebbing away. We watched uh, newspapers, right? In my day, I got paid to carry this physical piece of paper, many reproductions of it, from house to house through sleet and snow, not so much the dark of night, but, it got late sometimes in the winter, I guess, or more likely really early. Uh, but, so newspapers have been hybridized with the interwebs, and now they're struggling also in a certain way, or they're redefined by it at least. Their niche has been readjusted. And then we have radio, of course, no brainer. Boom. Mail. We got email, no question. Boom. Uh, Telephone. Pretty much what we're doing is, telephone plus a bunch, right? Uh, it's also modified this media. It made television two-way, which was, I can remember when Dick Tracy had in the cartoons, he had a wristwatch communicator with a little TV screen on it that he could talk to the home base on. And this was like sci-fi. This was like Flash Gordon stuff, right? So, so I guess my point is that the interwebs have been hybridizing with everything, and it sort of redefines the territory when it does that. And like any tool, it also shapes us as we have shaped it, and there becomes this feedback interplay between us and it. And so now what we're seeing, which to my way of thinking seems inevitable, as did all of these things that I've listed so far, is we're seeing different dimensions of the interwebs hybridizing with money. So, that shows up initially maybe as you can check your account balance online because your bank has a website and you can get in through that. Uh, Maybe then it goes a step farther. Maybe you could apply for a loan or something. When I tried to send a wire to Africa, though, I still had to go in and physically sign a piece of paper to get that wire to go. And I had to pay, I've been paying like 45 bucks a month recently just to send a chunk of money by wire around the globe. A number of big shots have complained about this, right? Going all the way back to Buckminster Fuller, who said that the countries were blood clots in the circulatory system of the planet.
That countries were or
The
banks were?
countries,
Okay.
yeah, I
Just
guess maybe
borders blocking
tariffs, currency,
information. Yeah.
currency control, currency manipulations, those sorts of things. And so to see what the interface of money with the computer age is like, you kind of have to understand some of the fundamentals of how money works, right? Used to be, of course, barter. We trade a cow for, oh, you like those? I'll give you 4 goats for that cow, right? Or we'll throw in a saddle with it, and there was this bartering back and forth to find these rough equivalencies. And then this aha idea that we could take a third thing and we could make it represent these things. And now we could say, well, the cow's worth 2,000 whatevers, and the goats are each worth one. 150 and the saddle's worth 2, and we could start to equate these things in terms of this third thing. But there always was this idea that those things were representing some actual thing, right? And those later became known as standards, right? So we'd have a silver standard, we'd have a gold standard. Uh, we hit a point where money stopped representing actual things, and at that point, these things become called fiat currencies. And investments have always had this problem of, like, say you want to invest in a lot of something to save your money, and, well, say you pick cheese. Well, cheese has some problems as a store of value. Now, it's better than bananas, right? Because bananas go kind of bad, kind of fast. Cheese might stay for a while. Uh, But it has some problems, and so we start going through these different things as stores of value, and when we get to currencies as stores of value, because they got detached from being worth actual things. See, if I'm trading you rubies, I can't just go print more rubies. I need a friggin' ruby mine, and I have to go get dirty, and I have to go through a lot of not rubies to get rubies. So it's pretty safe that if I have a stash of rubies, nobody's going to just all of a sudden show up flooding the market with rubies, because a certain amount of effort has to go out to make those rubies. And that was the idea with gold also, was that, well, gold mining is a lot of work, and sometimes you come up empty-handed, and so the gold supply becomes a good place for people to stash money. Although I just heard, it might not be true, that Uganda discovered a gold supply that they claim is equal to the existent gold in all of circulation now.
And the British missed it?
Well, yeah, I guess you got to wonder.
Huh.
But there were some swampy, you know, places you really have to have a pair of balls on you to explore.
Well, and there are other, economic interests there now, I'm sure,
Yeah,
exploiting it or trying to, yeah.
and petroleum. But see, petroleum is another good example. Here's a thing that, so all these different things that have value, they all start moving in value against each other. But when you have something that someone can just print up a bunch of, like a fiat currency, or that one person from one political seat of power can make a pronouncement about, and then all of a sudden now the stability of that currency is in question. That's not as stable an idea as gold or rubies, or things that won't go bad. Uh, so that's where this new idea of crypto comes in. Uh, one of the things about Bitcoin, without going into all the complexities of mining Bitcoins, and but one of the things about it is that it's set up so that there will only ever be so many. I think it's 21 million. So whether they were worth 20 cents or they were worth $100,000, and it's curious, we're talking about this today because Bitcoin just hit a new high of over 109. The old high was 109,114. And it did, I don't know that it would close whenever that happens on a 24-hour, 7-day a week market. I don't know whether that they're going to plant the flag as a new high or not. I don't know how that works, but uh, there will only ever be so much. And that was part of the original formula written into the code. It's got to go through a process. They say the last one is going to take 52 years to mine. Is that curious or what? Uh, but so that means that even though it's a market, it goes up and down. If people start to collectively rely on it and put value into it, they know it can't be diluted by other people, but just printing twice as much. And this is what inflation is. If people haven't, we haven't used the I word yet. But, basically, if you're using money and there's a certain money supply, the prices are adjusted to that money supply, right? And so then if all of a sudden, without any increase of value being put into the mix, if all of a sudden there's twice as much money, well, everything, the value of money just got cut in half because there's no new stuff. So effectively, the price of everything doubles to seek that balance, right? So so the various cryptos are set up in certain ways so that it's a limited supply to make it attractive as a means to store value. And I think the real thing that it offers is the ability now to move electronically all the way around the globe uh, at light speed at very low cost. So now what we're seeing for those folks that saw our episode with Jeff Moore, he talked about the life cycle of a disruptive technology. And crypto coins are a great example of a disruptive technology. He talked about the different chapters in the life cycle of this on its way from a new idea to widespread market adoption. And there's a point where it crosses the line from people kind of are resistant about doing it because nobody else has done it. I think he described that as are you doing it? If not, I won't either. To then you cross a line where, well, if you're doing it, I must do it because now everybody's doing it. So he also talked about solving a problem and that solving the problem needing to be that stage to move across into the pragmatic section of the population and not the true believers or the futurists. And so it looks like now we're seeing all these curious things happen where we're seeing big investment houses are now bundling electronic funds into investment products. We're seeing people that at high institutions that used to talk trash about Bitcoin, all of a sudden, like I think BlackRock is now the largest holder of Bitcoin. I heard. So we're sort of seeing that they may not like it, but they're doing it because they know they have to. And this is that stage right before what Jeff called the tornado. So that's kind of what I've been seeing, just sort of applying things. But there's other dimensions that I think are really fascinating about it also.
Maybe this might lead to some of those dimensions, but a number of years ago, you were talking a lot about local currency and kind of moving moving your thinking from you know looking at the problems with fiat currencies and concluding that local currencies and circulating money in a local economy was of potential great economic benefit to a community. And I'm curious how your thinking about that relates to your current thinking about crypto.
You know, Curiously, I think crypto may solve some of those problems. For example, if we wanted to do a local currency, we could actually now go onto there's a few sites and actually create our own cryptocurrency. And if we, told our village this is our new currency, our new alternative currency, complementary currency, there's a whole established electronic setup to do that, which now there wasn't 15 years ago when we were talking about that.
Yeah, we were talking about everybody has a ledger.
That was the old Swiss way, right? But then everybody could do math. I think that the interesting thing or the difficult thing really about local currency is you need buy-in, and and the psychology of humans is, especially Americans, is they're such individualists that to get a large group of people or even a small group of people on the same page about some collective activity that sort of requires trust to pour into, that's kind of an uphill climb when we look at adoption. And so there might be ways in a tourist town to put together something like a Berkshire's kind of an idea and actually pitch it to enough of the business community to see a potential top side to it to get adoption. But there still needs to be a lot of cooperation. The thing about crypto is what brings people to it, it seems to me like, are the two things that they say are the only things that move the market: greed and fear. The fear is money value in what they call the whales. uh, they're afraid if they store their money in US dollars, the way with the shakiness of the petrodollar and the BRICS nations and all these things coming up.
Whales are large asset holders.
Yeah, exactly. And people big enough that when they move, they splash the water. Uh, and so so they're looking for places for places to store wealth that someone can't just print more of and give away to their friends under the guise of whatever. Uh, and that's where crypto starts to look appealing. So that I think that once some of those folks came to the conclusion that, okay, this is not going away, it doesn't seem like humans are going to decide to stop using computers anytime in the near future. Uh, so if you're willing to bet that the future is going to have computers, then it makes sense to bet on the idea that the computers are going to ultimately hybridize with money. So the question is just when, how, in what mechanisms, and things like that. Uh, but so the big money now, I think, is trying to run away from devaluation through inflation, and they're hedging, right? I guess that's the real term is they're balancing their some bets with other bets. And this, the more I've looked into it, in some sense, calling it crypto is sort of like a way to hide it in front of everybody's face. I think the thing, that I'm seeing is, and one of the crypto assets that got my attention is called XRP. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to make a computer protocol that all the banks can talk to each other with so that I can send my money to Africa and I don't have to wait and it doesn't cost me $45. And it seems like now we're seeing more or less widespread adoption. The big bankers, they may not like it, but they realize this is the way the world is going. It's almost like, I've talked about the dog running in a certain direction, and at some point the fleas have to stop tugging on hairs and just realize this is the way the dog is running. And the fleas that survive adapt to that change. That's what's happening. We're seeing the globalization of value. And uh, so, for example, there's this whole idea of the tokenization of RWA, which are real world assets. So, for example, you could potentially go on your phone and buy an interest in a hotel building in Dubai, or maybe in a work by Van Gogh. Or the idea is that anything that has value can be tokenized, including existing stocks and bonds. I don't know if bonds are
Does
tokenized.
tokenized mean broken into fragments of value so more people can participate?
I think basically that's what we're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, this is one of the problems with storing wealth is that good wealth is divisible so that, you can't really break up the Mona Lisa. This is where the cheese wheel comes in. It actually wins over the Mona Lisa because you can give, here's a quarter of your interest. But it's really difficult to do with other stores of wealth, right? So the idea is that these things are getting set free in the electronic age, if you will. But the other thing that's fascinating here that I've it's caught my attention, and I never would have thought, 3 months ago, I never would have thought this, but one of our mutual friends, our neighbor Ian, he said, "Oh, you should check this out. This is what going," and so I started pursuing it, and this idea that you can see the graph of it could be a market, it could be a currency, it could be the flow of liquidity into certain assets, it could be what they call market cap, the total amounts of capitalization that different interests have. Uh, but you get this thing that sort of starts to obey its own laws when it starts to work on this aggregated scale, and it starts to move in flows. Flows one way, flows the other way. Sometimes it sort of defibrillates a while in between. It's like it goes through attraction, aversion, and bewilderment. Those seem to be the three states of the market, right? You've either got a bullish trend, things are going up and they're trending up, or you have
Eh,
a bearish trend and things are going down, or you have this neutral when they say things move sideways. They don't go up, they don't go down, they just kind of defibrillate, you know.
I just want to remind our listeners that attraction, aversion, and bewilderment are the things that distract us from higher purpose, right?
Taken from Buddhism.
Yeah.
That
So,
that are like the 3 states of mind, really. So we get this aggregated state of mind, and what is it about?
well,
This
they're
is
the
where
three
mind
they're
meets
the three
matter,
states
right?
of ego, right? They're the three states of monkey mind.
Right, right.
Yeah.
But of the mind that motivates action, the whip and the carrot, if you will. Uh, y
Yeah. I don't
or
know if I agree that all action is motivated at that level, but we can come back to that.
well, I don't know that I mean, I think there is a place for altruistic action. I don't think it shows up in the markets, though,
Right.
like that.
That's my point. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so you look at these things, and then you start to see all the different ways that humans address this as a problem, because now there's a lot of incentive, right? If you can figure out this is the kind of a problem that they call stochastic, right? It comes from the Greek stokastikos, and it basically the Greek idea is to aim or to guess. And this is exactly what we've spoken about, the the determined universe moving into the possibilistic, shaded by the probabilistic components, because that's what you're trying, it's all about predicting the markets. If you can know what's going to happen in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the rest is easy. So at the same time, it becomes like an art as well as a science, because it has to do with this interaction of mind and the stuff that we're talking about, the value that's getting moved. Uh, and so, for example, here's an example of that. Market analysts will use a thing that they'll call a Fibonacci tool. And the Fibonacci sequence pulls out certain ranges. So I talked about the three states: attraction, aversion, and bewilderment. Well, market experts, they can make money in times of attraction and in times of aversion. But in times of bewilderment, it's very difficult to make money, right? And there are people maybe that can do it by dialing into the minutia, these day traders that'll ride the little tiny huffs and puffs of change. But but it's in the big ups and the big downs that big money is made, and also conversely lost, right? But so so we have this mapping of how mind meets the stuff, and mind is trying to figure out the science, right? That has no humans involved, no human component because natural science mind doesn't want subjectivity. But so they have this tool called the Fibonacci tool, and you go on either a strong upward trend or a strong downward trend, and you slap this tool and spread it out from the bottom of the trend to the top of the trend, and it will lay out Fibonacci zones. And then they have nice names for these zones, like the golden pocket is one of them, or the golden zone. And what happens is nothing like if we look at nature, nature doesn't just typically make a movement. A better idea is like labor. If you look at giving birth and labor, is that there's a movement and there's a relaxation of the movement, and there's another movement and there's a relaxation of the movement. So what we're seeing is always a zigging, zagging between a yin and a yang. It's always some version of a sine curve that changes in frequency and amplitude, but we know that when it's up at some point it's going to go down, and when it's down at some point it's going to go up. So so that's what you're always seeing, and and it's always this relative ups and downs and how they play out against each other that gives us your general trends, right? So so the idea is that when things stop moving up and they start moving down, they'll call that a pullback or a retracement. And the idea is that in an upward trend, a certain amount of retracement or pullback is normal, but more than that amount signals something else is happening, like a change of trend or what they'll call a change of character that's based on a change of structure of the graph that you're seeing. So you've basically got these zigs and zags and trying to read from this when do things change and when do they, you know, stay the same or go even better, and it all has to so my point about the Fibonacci numbers is all traders know this tool. And they will frequently use the Fibonacci numbers to, for example, you're going to do a trade, you're going to set a low point maybe, and if it starts to fall and it falls below that point, I'm out. Cash me out, autopilot. And I know I took a loss across the snout, but I didn't get my whole head cut off because right. And they'll use that Fibonacci zone. So if it falls out of that zone, I'm outie, right? Well, now the question becomes, are those Fibonacci numbers, do they function because there is a natural aspect to the interplay of desire and fear that happens in a market that happens to show out at the Fibonacci points because nature likes Fibonacci numbers? Or is it because all the traders, when they're learning how to trade, are taught about the Fibonacci new tool? So they're all set up to bail out at certain numbers that all use the same math formulas because they're all hypnotized to the same, this is the way it works.
It's a objective subjective problem.
Did it come from the bottom up or from the top down? It's that same question, right? And how much is your belly involved in all this? So there's always that, right? And but to me, in some sense, the old way, some years ago, I did inherit a few stocks, not much to do anything with, and I never even got over the learning curve of what I would do to do anything because it would involve calling up some dude on the phone and telling him, do this for me or do that, and it involved understanding some entire other world that, I'm reading a number out of a newspaper, and it's like, that doesn't give me enough to go with to understand, "Oh, yesterday in the newspaper, it was higher or it was lower." But, you know, but now that we've transitioned to the fact that I can look at this all on my smartphone, I can actually go on a laptop and using some very cool programs, uh, one I like called TradingView, not a sponsor, but it works. You can change all the parameters. You can see this, and you can actually like get your fingers into the dynamics like the computer age has impacted everything. It's put the data not just at your fingertips, but manipulatable in a way that you can start to see different relationships, right? So you can learn about a relative strength index and a what they call a MACD, which is a moving average, the convergence divergence. You can start to see these different dynamics, and you can break it down because it's all at your fingertips, right? And you can see the tools that back in the day people needed to really bust out just to get the data, just to apply these tools. And you can do it while you're waiting for your burger on your cell phone, or maybe you'd want to crack your laptop to do some of the more sophisticated things. But it's like the fact that I can go online and I can find out where the M2 money supply for liquidity is, and what that graph looked like. And then I can graph that, I can pull that, I can graph other things against it, right? And I'm not a computer anybody, right? Like I literally started learning about this maybe 2 weeks ago. And but the fact that all of that stuff is at my fingertips now, uh, I can start to understand it as a flow, because and also because crypto moves faster. The market never closes, right? It's 24/7, unlike the stock market. So when people go to sleep here, people in the Far East are waking up and they're doing their deal. And so there's these, the Asian session and the Middle Eastern session, and so there's this whole global thing that I think is very new. And
I
yeah.
remember you telling me about a Chinese master who said that he could identify the slot machine on a casino floor that was ready to pop because of the stagnant energy, I assume, that
He
he
didn't
could
just say that he could. I
you saw him
saw
do it.
him come away from, New Mexico, casinos. Out of 5 or 6 times, I think there was only 1 time he didn't leave. We didn't get a picture of him with a stack of coins. He wasn't, and he wasn't pointing to it or saying anything about it. It was me that said, "Hey, bro, hook a brother up, man, if you've got a way to do this." And his response was, "Yeah, well, it's all chi. Chi go in, chi come out. Your job, figure out where chi come out." Right, well,
Yeah, which
yeah,
is bizarre, but okay. I mean,
version of the same thing we're talking about.
that's right. Yeah, this kind of
Yeah.
peristalsis you're talking about, the contraction expansion, these natural rhythms. I don't know. It's a little hard to believe that such basic um, tenets of how things work could be applied to such a complicated or sophisticated system. And on the other hand, everything that human beings are and human beings create is an outcome of nature, right? And it always kind of cracks me up when people differentiate between, did this happen naturally or was it manipulated by people? Because what's unnatural about that? It's as
Well, and
natural as it
here
gets.
here
So
we're doing it from a couple different directions, right? I mean, that's what's interesting about this is you have the guys that are just reading the wave. Like, and that's why they go into crypto coin. They don't care if it's fart coin. There's literally a crypto called fart coin. It just has a graph, just like all the other ones have a graph, and it apparently, according to their worldview, will follow the same dynamics that all graphs follow if we're graphing this interface of humans and matter through desire and fear. And but how that works, they don't really care. They just know kind of that it seems to work more than it doesn't, so they come out on top. But then you have the people that do what's called study the fundamentals. And that says, okay, don't just buy this, find out what it does, Who are the people behind it? What's the track record? Why would it make sense that the future would look like X or Y? Do they, what are the contracts they're doing? Or what are the acquisitions they're making? What's their overall game plan? Are the guys that are driving it smart or lucky? Or do they have a vested interest somewhere else? Or like all those things that a responsible investor would look at. But then there's also the big environmental things. Okay, the lawsuit from the SEC just got dropped. What's that going to do? Or the Fed just lowered the interest rate. Boom, what's that going to do? So some of the things, it seems like their effects are pretty direct and understandable. As the money supply changes, people can't spend money they don't have. So you watch the money flows and you know that and yet other things are very, and I watch these curves and I watch the news and I haven't been doing it that long, but I listen to these people with their different theories and all that. And I get it's almost like astrology. There's this sensibility that, yeah, something is going on here. There seem to be it's not entirely random. There are definitely natural dynamics that are at work, and they ought to be distillable through mathematics, and yet there's still we can't ever get uncertainty out of the principle. We don't need to go into physics, right? If if you could get uncertainty out of the principle, there would be people that just won all the time. It'd be like going to Vegas and knowing the dice before they land, right? Uh, But nobody see I mean, there's definitely people that are really at the top of that game, and the interesting things about that is it also has a reflexive component, because you'll see people come into this space, and it's like they've invested some money and they see the value go down and like, "Oh my god," and so there's a whole psycho-emotional dynamic to the way these traders play the game that maybe not everybody is set up for. Yeah.
So, is there more to be said about kind of the emergence of crypto and kind of how you're relating to it with sort of some natural laws or sensibilities and the development of consciousness. So I've been thinking a lot about what does the integrative worldview mean, and and how does it bring the modern and postmodern together? And we've talked a lot here about the need for a new ethics and getting to that through discourse or a dialectic. Um, what it seems like there's a parallel here, just in terms
Mhm.
of the emergent. What are you
Yeah.
seeing?
Well, I mean, I think I've been suspecting the whole time that the internet was kind of like the evolution of an exoneurosystem, and that like slime molds seem to be able to communicate across great distances for the allocation of information as well as resource, apparently. And I feel like that's kind of what we're seeing is this sort of the emergence of that that we just by following the thread of what does it make sense to do next now that we've discovered X, Y, or Z, what are the ways that we discover that it makes sense to use X, Y, or Z, we are becoming more of a global unity. I'm not saying a world order, but I'm saying that there is some awareness of and this is that story through time also. When I flew for the first time to Africa across Europe and across the Mediterranean, I had a whole aha based just on scale because I'd flown across the United States. And then all of a sudden, all these things that I'd heard about, all of history and all these things that had happened, and Ulysses sailing all around this thing. And now I could put it in scale with my life experience for the first time. And I felt like I was a little bit closer to palming that perceptual basketball to get the global idea. Buckminster Fuller had this idea for the machine that he built, and it was basically I think he called it the world map, but it was an engineered globe that was large enough. I think it was 200 some feet across that you could see a 500-acre ranch on it. Uh, if that cube was blocked out, but you could see the whole, basically. And I think he had it so it would come apart and lay flat like his Dymaxion map, and then maybe reassemble up into a globe, and you could walk around it and find particular places on it. Now, of course, we do that with Google Earth. Uh, but he, being an engineer, is like, well, you could build this so that people could get it, so they could get the one globeness of the thing. And so I think that electronically, that's kind of what's happening. And that we're seeing, initially it was information that was passing. And I was blown away because of the connection between our little village here in northern New Mexico and the village in Uganda, and how, there was caring that was moving across there. Well, this next level is now the facilitation of value actually moving across that way, as sort of the final chapter of the story of having to lug the thing from one place to another. And I think I was told that the Rothschilds, that was one of their ways they started to make money, was by having banking houses in different countries, and you could take a letter of credit instead of having to lug the gold with a horse or an ox and pull a wagon of it, whereupon highwaymen could have their way. So this is sort of like still a reinvention of that mechanism of moving value securely. And and there's the people that are Bitcoin purists are the ideas that now it's the money is connected to the algorithm and to the market, and no human intervention can really get in the way of it. Now, how true that is, whether it's manipulatable or not, I can't answer that. It's a technical question, but the idea, I think, and the purists for whom it's a more of a religious movement, is the idea that value somehow escapes the clutches of perfidious government. And I think that we're not gonna see a revolution like that, but we may well see a hybrid version that happens with the banks actually having a role to serve, and but having to play by a new global set of circumstances.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the mainstream media trying to get into podcasting and, um, posting on Twitter and or X, and trying to play in the new media world, but really struggling to make the transition. Maybe some are more successful than others. I don't really know the space well enough, but I wonder if there's a similar relationship here between the traditional banks and new currency.
I think that's what the EFT funds are about, is that the traditional type of investor wants to have certain protections, and they wanna have someone sitting in between that mystery and their life savings, and that's kinda what the broker has done before. So we are seeing big brokerages now creating funds out of those digital assets and offering those as a product, sort of as an in-between thing to the customer, sort of taking on the responsibility of going straight to the Bitcoin market and saying, okay, I like this coin, I don't like this coin. I'm choosing this as my entry point in the curve, and I'm going to have this exit strategy. And like there is a learning curve there. And I can understand that a lot of people are in a position where the, it shows up like an entirely another career to have to learn about. And the idea of jobbing that out to a professional maybe might become that role. I suspect there's still going to be a role for that. You know, I looked at it and I've learned about it in the past couple weeks. enough that I felt okay floating a little skin in the game. Uh, but I'm not, I'm definitely not rolling the dice with my future on it for sure. And, and I'm trying to manage my expectations as to be pretty realistic. At the same time, I know what it was like to try to send money around the globe. I've been doing it literally for the past 4 years, and I've seen the different possibilities, and I've seen the paradigm clash between the old model and the new model. I go to the bank and I do it, it's 45 bucks. I do it on Remitly or World Remit, and it's 99 cents or free sometimes. And that's also within the Bitcoin altcoin world. Bitcoin transactions are still not fast. And some of the newer coins like Ethereum or Solana or XRP, they're much more efficient systems. And so if it's not there, if it's there actually to have a utility, that's sort of what the fundamentals of that coin is. It has to serve a purpose, not just be a novelty. Uh, and so that and there's a whole class of coins they call utility coins. And then there's a class of coins they call privacy coins because they're very highly secure, and who owns those coins is more complicated to unravel. And and then you have all the meme coins, your Pepe coins and your Trump coins, and you could go online, and in a half an hour you could figure it out, and you could put out your own Boaz coins if you had the druthers. You'd want a snappy graphic. We could do a fool's coin.
Uh-huh.
Might be fun someday to look into.
Sure.
You know, that'd be a fun way to. We've already got the token designed, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Cool. Well, an interesting diversion for us. I'm especially interested in kind of like, what does that mean for meaning making? And I'm glad we touched on that a little bit. But yeah, I think maybe we'll leave it there.
yeah, I mean, it seems like a chapter, and like we maybe are at the head of a chapter. And so, if this inspires you to go check out crypto, and if you become a crypto bazillionaire, remember your
Subscribe.
friends here at Fools and Sages, So just saying, just saying.
Bueno. Thanks, Brian.
Well, have a good one.
You too.